Hello, second graders. Welcome to Science with me, Miss Taylor. I would like to tell you a little bit about precipitation. So we're going to read a story called Down Comes the Rain. All right, but before we read the story, let's talk about a few words that we'll come across in this story. One of them is a droplet. And a droplet is just a fancy word for a teeny tiny drop of water. So if you look at the picture here, this would be kind of like right here, this little one up at the top might be like a drop of water. Well, a droplet would be just like a teeny tiny speck. Teeny tiny speck of water would be a droplet. Evaporate is a word that means when water changes from a liquid to a gas. So the reason that water changes from a liquid into a gas is because it gets warmer. And you'll see this little picture here. The sun warms up the water that's on the earth and it turns into water vapor, which is a gas. We can't see it, but we know that there is water vapor in the air. So that leads us to our next vocabulary word, water vapor. These are the tiny little droplets of water that are in the air. Water vapor is a gas. And here's another picture. You can kind of see this one because there's lots of water vapor. It almost looks like it's right next to like a waterfall or something. So this water vapor you can see, but normally when the water vapor keeps going up into the sky, we can't really see it, but we know that it is there. This next word, condense, is a fancy word that just means when those water vapor, little tiny droplets of water, when they cool, they go up into the sky, they cool and they stick together. So that is called condensing. When things go up, they get cooler and they stick together. And when water vapor sticks together, it makes clouds. And we can kind of see a picture of that here, these little bits of water vapor in the air, and they kind of stick to those little dust particles that are floating around. I can see some down here in my basement. And those little bits of water vapor stick together and they kind of stick onto the bits of dust that are in the air. And then eventually those little drops stick together more. And then those little drops clump together and make a cloud. So a cloud is millions of water droplets that stick together. And our last word that we're going to look at before we look at our story are hailstones. And hailstones, sometimes referred to as just hail, are frozen ice pellets that contain layers of ice. All right, so let's read Down Comes the Rain. Rain comes from clouds. It comes from big clouds and little clouds. It comes from black clouds, white clouds, and gray clouds. All clouds, big ones and little ones, gray ones and white ones, are made of billions of tiny drops of water. The drops are called droplets because they are so small. If this is the size of a drop of water, so here he's got like a little drop of water, a droplet would be just a tiny speck, even smaller than this one. So if you're thinking about, well, what's the difference between a drop and a droplet? A droplet just means a really teeny tiny little speck. Water droplets come from water vapor. Water vapor is a gas. So there is water vapor all around us. There's always water vapor in the air, but you can't see it, you can't smell it, and you can't feel it. Now, sometimes after it rains and there's more water vapor, more moisture in the air, you actually kind of can smell the water or the moisture in the air, but usually we can't see it, we can't smell it. Like right now, I am in my basement and there is water vapor in the air, even if I'm inside, but I can't see it, I can't smell it, I can't really feel it, but it's there. Water vapor is made when water evaporates. And remember, we learned that that means when water turns from a liquid into a gas. In the morning, this is something you can try at home. So in the morning, put a teaspoon of water in a saucer. So if you have like a little plate or a little bowl, you could put a little bit of water. By that night, it may have evaporated into the air. Ooh, and I bet some of you have done this. If you put a little bit of water Or maybe you have a little bit of water left in the glass and you leave it out. And then the next day you come back and the glass is empty, it's dry, because that little bit of water that was in the cup or the bowl has evaporated. It's warmed up and it's turned into water vapor. When wet clothes hang on the clothesline, the water in them evaporates. Oh, yeah. Think about that. The heat from the sun changes the water drops into droplets and then water vapor. Let's see, the heat from the sun changes the water drops and droplets into water vapor. Yeah, so the water that's in the clothes, the sun heats it up and it turns it into water vapor that goes out into the air. Just like the heat from the stove changes water in the kettle to water vapor. If you heat it long enough, all the water boils away. The water vapor goes into the air. Yeah, and if you have like a kettle, or if your parents are, maybe boiling some water to make pasta, you might see the steam coming up, and that steam is water vapor. Most of the water vapor in the air comes from lakes, rivers, and oceans. It comes from the leaves of plants and from the wet ground. Heat from the sun causes the water to evaporate. So you can see here some little arrows showing the water that's on the ground. The sun heats it up and it's evaporating. It's turning to water vapor. Lakes and rivers and oceans, the water in them evaporates. The water changes from a liquid to a gas, and the water vapor goes into the air. Another way that we can see this is in the wintertime. When you breathe out, you put water vapor into the air. Usually you cannot see the water vapor, but it's there. Sometimes if it's cold, you can see your breath. If you ever gone outside and you go, oh, and then it forms like a little cloud. That's because the water vapor condenses. And remember, we learned that just means sticks together. So the little bits of water vapor, if it's really cold outside and you breathe, and you could make a little cloud because that water vapor is sticking together. It changes from a gas into a little cloud. And a cloud is just kind of a whole bunch of little bits, little droplets of water. When cows, horses, dogs, and cats breathe out, they put water vapor into the air too. On a cold day, the water vapor changes to droplets and makes little clouds that you can see. Maybe when it gets cold in a couple weeks, you could go outside and say, hey, I have a magic trick. Watch me make a cloud. And then a little cloud. You could make water vapor change to water. Put a lot of ice into a glass of water. So another thing we could do at home. Okay, I think I have ice. Yep. And put it into a glass of water. As the glass gets colder, the outside of the glass gets wet. Water vapor in the air is condensing on the glass. The water vapor is sticking together onto the glass. It's condensing. There may be so much condensation that the glass drips. Yeah, so you've probably seen that before. If you have a cold liquid and you put it on the table, and maybe especially in the warmer weather, like summertime, and then it drips and it leaves water behind, and then maybe your parents might say, why is there water on the table? Because the water condensed on the outside of the glass, which is why we sometimes use coasters so that we can protect tables and things like that. Sometimes the glass stays dry. That means there's not much water vapor in the air. So like in the wintertime, it might just stay dry. But in the summertime, when there's lots of water vapor, it can condense. The air holds the water vapor. Breezes carry it from one place to another. Much of the vapor moves up and away from the earth. Air above the earth is always cold. The higher you go, the colder it gets. When air gets cold enough, the water vapor in it condenses. So as the water vapor in the air goes up, it gets colder and colder. It's almost like when you get cold, and what do you want to do? You want to cuddle up, maybe with a family member or a friend or something, and you stick together. That's what happens with the water vapor. It goes up, and they want to stick together, kind of like they're cold. The water vapor changes to water droplets. And the water droplets make clouds. So clouds are just made up of teeny tiny little droplets all stuck together and clumped together. When clouds are thin and wispy, they're holding only a little water. When clouds are thick and dark, they are holding much more water. So like over here, lots of water in this cloud. A single droplet is so small you cannot see it, but you can see a cloud. That's because there are millions and millions and millions of water droplets in a cloud. So many, millions and millions. Inside the clouds, droplets join together to make drops. When clouds can no longer hold them, the drops fall to the earth. So when the clouds get too heavy, too full of these droplets, water vapor, this moisture, they fall as rain. The sky is full of them. They fall through the air and splatter on the ground. They are raindrops. Sometimes there are only a few raindrops that fall slowly. It is drizzling. A little bit of rain, it's drizzling. Sometimes there are lots of big drops that fall very fast. Now it is pouring. So if there's just a little bit of rain, oh, it's just drizzling. I don't really need my raincoat. But when it's pouring, you probably need a raincoat or an umbrella. Sometimes the drops in clouds freeze. These raindrops become ice drops. This can happen even on a hot summer day. And let's see, it says some clouds may be higher than most airplanes ever go. The higher the clouds, the colder they are. Ooh, and we will also learn about the types of clouds. And these really high clouds are called cirrus clouds. That's because the clouds and water droplets are high above the earth. Many clouds are so high that it is freezing cold, because remember, the higher you go, the colder it gets. In these high, cold clouds, water vapor changes to droplets, and the droplets change to drops. The drops freeze into ice. And here we have inside the cloud, these tiny bits of ice start to fall. But they don't always fall out of the cloud. Instead, they may be carried upward by air that is moving away from the earth. Ooh. As they are carried upward, more water collects on the tiny bits of ice. When that water freezes, the drops of ice have another layer on them. The ice drops are now heavier, so once more they fall toward the earth. But air moving away from the earth may carry the ice drops upward again. Higher and higher they go, and another layer of ice freezes onto them. The ice drops get heavier and heavier. They get so heavy that the air can no longer carry them upward. So the ice drops fall to the earth. It is raining ice. Little guy down here. Yikes. Yeah. And I bet a lot of you know what this is called. When sort of like when these little frozen ice pellets get stuck in a cloud and they're kind of going up and down, and there's layers that are formed on top. What are those called? Yeah. Did you say hail or hailstones? Nice job. The ice drops are called hailstones. They may be the size of your fingernail, or they may be as big as golf balls, or even bigger. In 1970, hailstones as big as softballs fell on Kansas. Ooh, my goodness. Fields of corn were flattened by the hailstones. My goodness, those are big hailstones. Let's see, hailstones are not stones. So even though we call them hailstones, they're not really stones. They're pieces of ice. So when it hails, go inside so you're not hit on the head. Doink. When it stops hailing, go outside and pick up a hailstone. Break it in two and you will see the layers of ice. Yeah, this is really neat to do. I bet some of you have done this before after it's hailed, and you can go outside and find the little hailstones. And if you break them in half, you can see the layers, and that shows how many times that they've been kind of bounced around inside a cloud. When the clouds, or water in the clouds makes hail. Water in the clouds makes rain. When it stops raining or hailing, the sun comes out. Once more, water evaporates. It evaporates from lakes, rivers, and oceans. It evaporates from the leaves of plants and from the wet ground. It evaporates from cows and horses and cats and dogs and from you and me. Yeah, there's even water that we are breathing out, and there's water in our skin that is evaporating. Isn't that crazy? The water changes to water vapor. It's carried up and away from the earth where the air is cool or even freezing. When the water vapor cools, it condenses. The water vapor changes to water droplets, and all together, the droplets make clouds. Water droplets join together to make water drops, and the drops fall to the earth from the clouds. And it kind of just keeps happening. And there's a name for that. It's called the water cycle, this continuous thing that is happening with the water, how it's moving around the earth. And then once more, it's raining. All right, so that was our story, Down Comes the Rain. And that story was mainly about rain and how rain is formed, but there are some other types of precipitation that I wanted to mention. So, in order to have precipitation, we need a few ingredients. So let's see, we need clouds. You need to have clouds in order to have precipitation. We need water vapor, little bits of water in the air, and we need little dust. There's kind of dust particles in the air that we can't always see, but they are there. So first, water vapor condenses in a cloud. So as the water vapor goes up, gets colder, sticks together and makes a cloud. So in order to have precipitation, you need to have a cloud. Then the water vapor clumps together. So it kind of keeps clumping together in these clouds. Finally, the clump of water gets too heavy. So there's too much moisture, too much water in the clouds. And it falls down as rain, snow, sleet, or hail. So again, here's our little picture of the water vapor that's in the air. And the water vapor sort of sticks to these little dust particles in the air. And then those water drops stick together, those droplets or drops. And then when there's so many, they make clouds. And then when there's just more and more moisture in the clouds, when the clouds get so heavy, they can't keep it in the air because of gravity, right? Then it falls to the earth as rain. So rain is made when a cloud becomes too heavy. Millions and millions and millions and millions of droplets. And too many millions, it has to come down. Snow is made when the droplets freeze into these really cool crystalline patterns. And that's kind of why we draw little snowflakes, like little kind of stars or X's, because they have these neat little patterns. It's pretty awesome. So when the temperature gets cold enough below freezing, then the droplets freeze and make snow. Now, hail, we learned about, is made when a raindrop freezes in the cloud and there's kind of some wind that keeps it in the clouds and more layers are added onto it before it finally falls down. It kind of gets bounced around in the cloud and then finally falls after it's got layers of ice. And then the last type of precipitation is sleet. And sleet is made when rain freezes as it falls. So sleet is often when we have this temperature that is not quite freezing, but almost freezing. And water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But when it's raining and if the temperature drops, the air temperature gets almost to freezing, then the rain starts to freeze and it makes sleet. All right. And if we were back in school right now, we would be looking at kind of taking some notes about precipitation, and I would ask you to draw a picture. And scientists often will make sketches and pictures of what they're learning about, and we always label our parts. So you can see here this little picture of, we've got our cloud, because we need a cloud to make precipitation. And then we have little bits of dust that are in the air and little bits of water vapor. And then when those bits of water vapor and dust stick together, and they make droplets, and the droplets stick together and make drops. And then it gets so heavy that it falls as rain or sometimes snow if the temperature is cold enough. Sometimes hail. You can see if the water vapor freezes and then gets kind of caught in a cloud and layers are added to it before it falls. And then sleet is that freezing rain. So as rain is falling, it's freezing. And then one more thing I wanted to mention is you may have heard these two words before, floods and droughts. So floods can happen when there's too much precipitation, particularly too much rain. When we have too much rain, there is the potential for a flood. And you may have also heard of something called a drought. And a drought is when we don't have enough rain, precipitation. And this can especially influence and impact farmers. They need rain to grow their crops. And if you don't get enough rain, that can really affect the crops. So floods, too much precipitation. Droughts, not enough precipitation. So I hope you enjoyed our story, Down Comes the Rain, learning a little bit about precipitation. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and maybe you can notice, do we have any precipitation today? How about tomorrow? Keep an eye out for it, scholars. See you again soon.